Much of America's history is underwater. From Central America to South America, and hundreds of thousands of acres and hundreds of towns in North America have been flooded. That's why we have a Stonehenge in the Great Lakes. There's a King Tut-like tomb in Arkansas that was flooded out. There are pyramids and other structures underneath Rock Lake in Wisconsin. There is really a plethora of underwater history that has been hidden. There was a continental grid, and all of these sites were raided during salvage archaeology projects. And Johns Hopkins professor J. Rendell Harris claims there was an Egyptian presence in the Mississippi and along the Gulf. From east to west coast, archaeologists, also known as tomb raiders, raced to loot these sites before they got flooded. This is a looting site. Look. You see how this is a structure? These hills that are being flooded are not just hills, they are structures. Some get dug out, and some get flooded and stay buried. And many buildings like this were flooded during urban renewal. Urban renewal means history demolition. But along with the unnatural flooding, we get the massive natural flooding that all happened around the same time, or exactly the same time. The Missoula and Bonneville floods completely reshaped the Pacific Northwest. The so-called Pleistocene era, which was not that long ago, completely reshaped America. They claim these floods were all at different times. But if we look at the La Brea tar pits, we find humans, mammoths, lions, saber-toothed tigers, camels, and all their bones are interwoven in these pits, alongside water-saturated wood and plants, as well as a mass of aquatic bugs. There was a massive, rapid, continental or worldwide flood. Then earthquakes brought up the oil that covered and concealed all the bodies that died in the flood as the water receded. And that's why none of the carbon dating can be trusted. Not only does oil throw off the dating system, so does old carbon introduced by seawater. All forms of dating are flawed, especially when you factor in major cataclysms. Look. Major resets happen much more often than we're told. When they test human remains, animal remains, and artifacts, they usually don't even test the object or person, they test the surroundings. But the stratigraphy is constantly changing in these cataclysms. Hundreds of feet of sediment are constantly being pushed around. So many of these so-called ancient human remains were from not that long ago, and they were so-called black. Look, there are endless examples. Look. This is not new. There's just so much propaganda. Even Harvard anthropologists, this was in major publications, nationwide. They are the Aboriginals. Pretty much all of the oldest remains are so-called black people, or they were undetectable. And many of the ones presented to us are using fragmented or distorted DNA. And they commonly use mitochondrial DNA, which doesn't give you autosomal readings. Look. You are who your father is. Your placenta is from your father, and that's what you breathe through. Breath is life and the connection to the source. This has one of the oldest references to the Amalekites of America. Look, in the Bible, the Amalekite men are largely wiped out. It means a severed people. The Amalekites of today are severed because the men were wiped out. This is why a lot of the so-called natives are fake, pretendians. So many records get redacted and blocked, but they did preserve some Micmac. It's similar to Egyptian. Look.